How does a drunk joke turn into a public price tag on a marriage? And why did my husband answer without shouting or fists? Only a calm distance. What happens when a neighbor waves cash, a video spreads, and the man you mocked lets the law do the talking? My name is Zephyr Morland, and I am not the villain people paint in comments and whispers. I am 32, I do payroll, and I keep numbers clean even when my life is messy. I married Adrian because he was calm, careful, and safe, but safe can turn into silence, and silence can feel like a locked room. On our anniversary, I drank too much, and I joked that I would sell him for $100 and a burger, and the room laughed because it was an easy laugh. Our neighbor Cassia heard it from her balcony, and later she came over waving money like a dare, and I still called it humor. Adrian did not fight or shout, and I decided his quiet was proof he did not care. I told myself I deserved more excitement, and I told a co-worker named Rowan that I felt unseen at home, and he looked at me like I was right to want oxygen. I call that honesty, not betrayal. I know what people think, but they were not in our kitchen counting minutes of silence. They did not feel how cold a bed can be when the person beside you refuses to warm it. It was our anniversary, and I wanted a louder night than the day he gave me. I set 2 cheap candles on the kitchen island and called it a mood. Then I poured the last of the Prosecco into mismatched glasses. I told Adrian that he could at least pretend to be excited, and he said he was happy to be home. I heard the word home and felt a small door close inside my chest. I decided to make the room laugh so I could breathe. I lifted my glass and said that I would sell my husband for $100 and a burger, because at least a burger arrived hot and asked for nothing. My friends barked out a shocked laugh that wanted more, and I put on a grin like a stage light. Adrian rinsed plates in the sink and said the joke was not kind. I told him it was only banter, and that adults with real love could handle a little heat. The balcony door stood open because the kitchen was warm, and the city air moved in. Our neighbor Cassia leaned over the rail with a camera strap on her shoulder and a smile like she had been waiting. She asked if the price was firm, and I said it was flexible for friends. The group howled, and someone raised a phone for a short clip. I watched myself on a screen for a second and liked the way I looked when I did not care. Adrian put a dish on the rack and said he did not want to be part of a bit. I told him he needed to lighten up because the night was young. He said nothing and wiped the counter in quiet circles that made me feel judged. I walked to the balcony and held my glass high like a cheap queen. I said that a burger was included to sweeten the deal, and Cassia said she knew a place that made better buns than my kitchen. I winked and told her to test me. She laughed and said she might. Behind me, my friends asked if I was serious, and I said it depended on the menu. I heard myself and felt an extra thrill when the laughter rose again. It felt like the kind of oxygen I had been missing in long weeks where Adrian and I barely spoke over the hum of the dishwasher. Adrian stepped into the hallway and came back with water for everyone. He said we should keep the noise down because Noah was asleep, and I said he was being dramatic. Someone whispered that I was savage, and I took a bow that made the candle flame waver. Cassia called across that a better price might pull real money, and I told her she could bring cash if she wanted proof. She said she liked proof. Then she vanished into her apartment with a small laugh. We moved back inside, and I lined up burgers on a baking tray like a joke turned into a plan. I said the buns were stale, and my friend said stale was part of the humor. Adrian asked if I needed help, and I said he could help by not killing the vibe. He pressed his lips, nodded once, and walked to the sink again. My phone lit up with hearts in our group chat, and a caption suggestion said that anniversary deals were back for one night only. I typed a line about clearance pricing and hit post because it felt brave to be the one who pressed send first. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door that sounded like a dare. Cassia stood there with her camera bag on one shoulder and a sealed white envelope in her hand. She said she had $1,000 in cash and she wanted to know if I would stand by my words. I laughed loudly enough to float above the shock of my friends. I said she was ridiculous and I loved it. She asked if we had a deal, and I said the auction was for entertainment only. Then I winked like I wanted to suggest a maybe. Adrian stepped back from the doorway and said this had gone far enough. I said this was harmless, and that neighbours who like to play should not be punished for having fun. Cassia smiled like a cat and tucked the envelope away. She said she would keep the money warm, then she took a photo of the burgers on the tray and left. Silence pressed in after the door closed. The candles burned lower, and my friends started whispering about the video they had taken. Adrian said he did not like being filmed for sport, and I told him no one was filming him, only my bit. He said my bit used his name and his face, and I said he could try laughter for once. He set a glass in the rack and said he was going to the guest room to sleep because he had an early start. I said he should at least say goodnight to me like a husband. He said goodnight with a voice that was not angry, only finished. I felt heat rise in my chest and told myself his quiet proved my point. He left the kitchen, and I noticed a thin binder on the hall table that said utilities, but it was thicker than our bills. I told myself he was being obsessive again, and I pushed the thought away. My phone buzzed with new likes, and a friend said the clip was already getting shared. I smiled and typed a playful line about supply and demand. From the bedroom, I heard the soft chime of Adrian's phone and a muted vibration. I saw a flash on his screen earlier in the night that showed a calendar reminder, and it had said library at 8:10 p.m., which made no sense on our anniversary. Now I heard a door latch click down the hall as the guest room closed, and I stood very still in the middle of the kitchen while the second candle went out. The morning after the joke felt strange, but I told myself it was only a hangover and some dust from the candles. I left early and let the door close on a quiet apartment. Adrian was already up and moving like a ghost that made coffee and did not spill a drop. He said he would take Noah to school and keep the day simple. I said I had a busy schedule and might be home late. He nodded and went back to packing a small snack bag with careful hands. I watched him fold a napkin like it was a message, then I shut the door and told myself he was trying to look noble. At the office, the air felt too bright, and screens glowed like eyes. Slack popped with a link to my boomerang, and someone asked if the auction had a buyout price. I wrote that humour keeps a marriage alive when the other person forgets to. A few people sent laughing faces and moved on. Rowan wrote that he hoped I was okay, and that the clip looked intense. I said I was fine, and that Adrian had been cold for months. I added that a woman needs sparkle or the weeks turn into grey paste. Rowan sent a nod and suggested coffee after lunch. I said coffee sounded helpful because my head was pounding. Before coffee, my manager Amara stopped by my desk and asked for a quick word in her calm voice. She led me to a small room near HR where the white walls looked like a warning. She said there had been tagged photos with our office listed in the profiles. She said perception matters even when no rules are broken. I said the clip was a joke at home, not a public attack. I said people online love to twist normal banter into drama. She said she understood, but that I should keep personal storms away from shared spaces. I nodded and smiled like I was grateful for advice I would follow. I told myself Amara liked me and would not make trouble. Ms. Kwan from HR came in with a neutral face and a notepad that stayed shut. She said she wanted to log a short conversation, only to cover the company in case people tried to pull it into work. She asked if I felt safe at home and if I needed resources. I said Adrian was not the type to hurt anyone and that silence was his worst habit. She said that policy is about patterns, not blame. I said I understood and kept my voice soft. When she left, Amara repeated that I should focus on tasks and let the noise die. I said I would, then I stepped back into the open floor with my smile fixed like a sticker. At lunch, Rowan and I walked 2 blocks to a cafe with harsh lights and cold metal chairs. He said the video looked like I was trying to get a reaction, and he wondered if I got one. I said Adrian washed dishes like a machine and refused to play along. I said a partner who cannot laugh is a partner who forgets to live. Rowan said he liked simple low drama and that I could always talk to him. I said I needed that because home was a quiet cave. He asked if meeting after work was smart, and I said it was fine because I was not a child. He smiled and said he would text later if his schedule allowed it. After work, I stopped at the supermarket for buns and soda because I wanted to show I could run a house and run a joke. In the bread aisle, Cassia rolled up with a basket and a lens cap swinging from her wrist. She said the video was funny but incomplete, and that real markets like cash. I said the night had been a party and not a sale. She said last night she had carried $1,000 and a camera, and that I had looked ready to make headlines. I told her she loved attention, and that she should not take my words literally. She said words become real when people film them. I laughed and said that the world had become too sensitive. She said the world had become very precise. While I paid at the checkout, a teen in line stared at my cart and my face. He said under his breath that he had seen the clip and that the comments were wild. I said the clip was taken out of context and that I love my family. His friend lifted a phone and acted like he was checking messages. I saw my reflection in the black glass and felt a twist in my stomach. I told myself they were children and their opinions were not a court. When I got home, the hall table carried a wall planner that did not belong to me. A date 2 weeks ahead was circled in red with tidy pen marks. A small sticky note sat under the circle and said, "Bring forms." I pretended it was for taxes and told myself Adrian had decided to be organised for once. I walked to the kitchen and found 2 mugs on opposite counters, which made the room look like a split diagram. I lined up the buns and tried to hum. I wandered down the hall and glanced into the guest room with the door half open. The bed was made with sharp corners. A small binder sat on the desk with the word household printed on the spine. It was thinner than a full file but thicker than bills. The window was cracked, and the room smelled like paper and the faint bite of printer toner. I picked up the binder and put it down again because my hands did not feel steady. I told myself Adrian was playing at being a clerk. My phone buzzed with a group chat titled Follow Up, and the preview line asked if the neighbour had come back with cash. I typed that I was not for sale and that people needed to chill. The chat exploded with reaction faces and short jokes. I looked at the doorway and saw Adrian slip past me toward the locked drawer in the small desk. He slid the household binder inside and turned a small key. The metal clicked like a very soft door. I told myself that the best way to end the whispers was to drown them in louder noise. I dressed in a bright top and met friends at a rooftop bar where music bounced off glass and wind. I said we should toast to flexible pricing and long marriages, and they laughed because they wanted a show. I felt the mood lift me, and I decided to lean into the bit until it bent like tin. I messaged Adrian that I was out with friends and that he should not wait up. He replied with a short line about picking up Noah early tomorrow, and I read that as cold rather than responsible. The bar lights turned warm and soft, and someone suggested that I run a fake auction round to cheer myself. I said it might help everyone relax, and I stood near the edge where the skyline looked like teeth. I used my hands like a host and called for bids in a playful voice. The group clapped and tapped their glasses in time. A man from another table asked if there was a reserve price, and my friend said the reserve was only a burger. I rolled my eyes and said that the menu was always negotiable, and the ring of faces leaned in as if they might buy something real. Adrian arrived late because a cousin had sent him the location. He walked to me, nodded at my friends, and took a step back from the circle. I asked him to relax, and he said he did not want to take part. I said he could support me by letting the room have fun. He said he did not want to be the joke in my hands. I said no one was hurting anyone, and that people needed joy. And I gave the crowd a wink, like I had already won. Someone raised a phone, and I did not ask them to stop. A chant started as a joke and turned into a beat. I heard my own name and the word auction roll together. A stranger counted down from 5 while filming, and the group echoed him with happy faces and open mouths. I saw Rowan slip from the back of the circle and hover near the exit door. He messaged that the cameras made him nervous, and he added that he preferred calm nights. I said he was overthinking a harmless scene. He replied that careers get ruined by harmless scenes. I sent a burger emoji and told him to meet me after, and he said maybe but also said that he needed distance from noise. While the crowd still laughed, Adrian put in earbuds and moved to the railing. He spoke in a low voice to someone, and I could not hear the words over the music. I saw him glance at his phone and open a small calendar block. A little glow reflected on his face as he swiped something away. I told myself he was just hiding from fun and calling his mother to complain. I felt the familiar need to push him, and I called out that the sale ended in 1 minute. The group made a fake drum roll on the tables. Cassia did not show, but a girl who knew her said she had posted a reel that morning. The girl said the caption called my price bold and sad. I pretended to laugh and said the reel only helped my views. The girl said views always ask for payment later. I told her that she should save her warnings for real problems. The girl lifted her phone, said that the night looked good on me, and turned the camera toward the chant. I held my chin up because I wanted the angle to be kind. The rooftop wind grew colder, and the crowd moved to the heaters. I felt the high begin to fade, and I knew I needed a softer light. I told Adrian we should grab a late snack if he was done sulking. He said he needed to sleep because he had an early morning. I said he was always leaving and that he never made a memory. He said he made memories for Noah and paid the bills, and that I could do what I wanted with my friends. I told myself that his tone was a dare, and I said we would remember tonight without him. On the metro home, the air was stale and the seats were full. I texted Rowan that the crowd loved me and that I was ready to feel alive. He said he would not meet because the clip was already on 2 feeds. I said he was cowardly and that I only asked for company. He said he had to protect his job and that he hoped I would sort things at home. I said home was a museum with no sound. A rider across from me filmed the row of passengers with his camera at chest height, and I saw myself in the small screen as a woman who spoke too fast with her thumbs. When I reached our floor, the elevator doors opened to a bright rectangle. The hallway smelled like cleaner, and the lights hummed. Adrian stood near our door with his phone in his hand. He did not look angry. He looked like someone who had slept less and thought more. I told him the night had gotten out of hand because people wanted to play. He said he understood how crowds work. He also said he would not take part again. I said he was dramatic, and that we could laugh about this in a week. He said he doubted that. Inside the apartment, I dropped my shoes and turned on the kitchen light. The brightness showed crumbs like small mistakes. Adrian walked to the small desk in the guest room and sat down. I followed because I did not want a secret. On his screen, a little notification box popped and said that a file had uploaded successfully. I asked what he was doing, and he said he was finishing some personal organization. I said he was trying to scare me. He said he was not trying to scare anyone. He added that order helps when things get messy. He closed a window when I stepped closer. I caught a glimpse of a calendar entry with the word storage and a time that read 7:20 a.m. He minimized it, stood, and said he was going to bed. I said he could at least say that I was still his wife. He said I knew the answer to that and that we would keep things calm for Noah. I wanted to throw a joke, but nothing came out. He left the room, and I stood by the desk feeling like the air had thinned. I arrived in the hall as the elevator bell chimed again and echoed off the walls. I stepped to the door and saw Cassia waiting near the lift with a white envelope in her hand and a calm smile. She watched Adrian step into our apartment without a word. The action clicked a moment later when the kitchen printer spooled and pushed out a single blank page. The cliffhanger settled as the blank page slid forward and stopped, and the machine hummed like it was thinking. The family restaurant felt crowded even before everyone arrived, and I told myself that noise would help me steer the story. A birthday banner drooped above a long table, and the server moved chairs like a stagehand who knew the act. I sat near the middle so eyes would land on me first. Miriam asked in a gentle tone how I was holding up, and I said I was fine and that people online loved to twist jokes into crimes. She said she had seen the rooftop clip and that public games can wound in private, and I answered that Adrian knows my humour and that our circle sometimes forgets how to laugh. Grant watched me with a quiet face and asked if Noah had slept well, and I said our son was resilient and that children bounce. I added that Adrian tends to withhold affection when he is stressed, and I implied that a little teasing keeps things alive. The cousins stared at their plates, and I felt the room tip away from me. The gifts went around, and I tried to chatter about work so the mood would loosen. I said my manager had reminded me to keep personal storms out of the office, and I described it as a friendly nudge. Miriam asked if I had apologized to Adrian for the auction line, and I said apology made sense if both sides owned their part. She asked what part I believed her son needed to own, and I said he had been cold for months. Grant set down his water and said distance can be a shield, and I pretended not to hear the aim. I laughed lightly and said a marriage cannot run only on chores and quiet folding. Someone at the far end muttered that a marriage also cannot run on public taunts. I smiled at the birthday cake like frosting could save me. When the plates were cleared, I took Noah to the park across the street because he needed a break from adult eyes. The wind pushed the swings, and a stroller squeaked on the path. Noah asked why Daddy slept in the guest room, and I told him Daddy needed quiet time for work. He said he had heard at school that I tried to sell Daddy for food, and he asked if that meant Daddy was not ours anymore. The words lodged in my throat, and I said, adults sometimes make jokes that do not land. He asked if jokes that do not land can still push people out of home, and I said the internet had confused him and that we were a family. He stared at the empty slide and said families should not have auctions, and I said he was right about that part. I felt my cheeks burn while a pair of parents on a bench pretended not to listen. We walked back to the community centre hall for the school fundraiser because I did not want to be alone with my thoughts. The room buzzed with raffle tickets and paper crowns. A mother from Noah's class asked if the video was real or edited, and I said it was performance with friends and not a contract. She said cameras have a way of making performance into reference, and I said people these days need thicker skin. Cassia drifted past with a camera on her strap and commented that she had offered real money and that I had seemed tempted. I laughed too loudly and said, neighbours who bring cash to jokes are starved for content. She said content always eats back, and I called her dramatic. Her eyes looked amused and tired at the same time. I tried to focus on the bake sale table, but the whispers pressed like a hand between my shoulder blades. I checked my phone and saw that a group chat titled Follow Up had pings I had not opened. The preview line said a new clip from the rooftop had better audio. I told myself that better audio only meant better context for my humour. A volunteer asked if Adrian would help stack chairs later, and I said he was busy with personal organisation. She said he always showed up when a job needed doing, and I felt the remark land. When we reached home, the hall smelled faintly of warm paper, and I noticed a single USB stick taped under a folder labelled Taxes with today's date scrawled in pen. The guest room door stood mostly shut, and the bed looked ironed flat. 2 mugs waited on opposite counters like polite strangers. I told myself Adrian had leaned into clerical theatre to make me uneasy, and I decided not to look spooked. I called Nyla and said in a bright tone that everything was under control. She said she would not pick sides and that I should make the next move small and kind. I said the next move would be clarity and fun, and she sighed. Adrian came in from a short run, and his face looked set but not angry. I said the fundraiser had been fine and that people need to relax. He said public stories collect witnesses, and he asked if Noah had eaten. I said our son had eaten and that people were turning nothing into a case. He said we should keep routines for Noah and keep the house calm. I said calm looked like punishment, and he said calm looked like safety. I felt the need to press him into a reaction, but the quiet held. I went to check on Noah, and he sat on his bed with a book he barely read. He asked in a careful voice if Daddy would live with Grandpa now, and he asked if I would sell him too if he was not excited. The room tilted, and I said he was my heart and that no one could buy him. He nodded without looking sure. In the hall, my phone vibrated with a new preview from Follow Up, and a small icon blinked before the message vanished. Noah's question hung in the air, and the hallway printer began to spool again with a slow, steady sound. The cliffhanger landed when the printer pushed a blank page, and the guest room gave a thin hum, and I stood still while the house drew a line I could not see. I found Adrian in the parking garage after work, and the air smelled like dust and brake pads. He stood near a concrete pillar with headphones on and a small notebook in his hand. I waved to make him pull one earbud out, and I asked if we could stop acting like strangers. He said he was focused on Noah's schedule and a few personal tasks, and his voice was even. I said he was hiding behind chores and acting like a martyr. He said he preferred order to chaos, and that quiet helped him think. I asked what there was to think about when the problem was only a joke that went too far. He said public stories have receipts, and he walked toward the stairwell with steady steps. In the stairwell, I tried to pass him so he would face me, but he kept a calm pace that made me feel small. I said I knew what he was doing and that he wanted me to beg. He said begging was not required and that routine was. He asked if I would get Noah to school tomorrow, and I said I would because I am not careless. He nodded like a manager, not a husband. His phone buzzed with a muted call labelled private, and he tapped to silence it without breaking stride. I asked if he was embarrassed by me now, and he said he was concerned for Noah. The word concerned hit harder than any insult. We took the metro home in separate cars, and I stared at the reflection of my own frown in the window. Rowan texted that he had seen a new clip and that it was loud. I said the internet always lied and that I needed a quiet drink anyway. He replied that his department had been warned to avoid gossip with staff. I said I only wanted a friend with kind eyes. He said he preferred distance until things were stable again. I told him he was overreacting like everyone else. He said jobs pay rent, and rent needs quiet. I wanted to snap, but my thumbs felt heavy. A rider in the aisle raised his phone and filmed the carriage, and I turned my face away from the glass. At home, the hall light made everything look staged. On the small desk, 3 slim binders were lined up with labels that said home, auto, and bank. I said he was playing Clark again, and he said order makes custody easier on children. I asked who said custody out loud, and he answered that routines require planning. I told him he was scaring me on purpose. He said he would never scare me and that he would handle matters properly. The word properly sat between us like a new piece of furniture. I tried to break the mood by cooking pasta, but the water hissed like it was telling me to go. 2 mugs waited on opposite counters, and the guest room door stayed mostly shut. I opened the drawer in the small desk and found a clean file tree on the laptop with folders labelled Archive A and Archive B. I said he was treating life like a server, and he said backups protect what matters. I asked what needed protection from me. He said nothing about me, only something about facts. He minimized the screen when I stepped closer, and a cloud sync pop-up flashed that a file had uploaded successfully. I told him that clicking things would not fix our marriage. He said shouting never fixed anything either. Later, I asked my parents to come by for tea, and they arrived with a paper bag of pastries. They said the fundraiser had been tense and that Noah looked tired. I said he was fine and that people had become too sensitive. My mother asked if I had apologized to Miriam, and I said I would when everyone calmed down. My father asked for a small screwdriver because the cabinet hinge was loose. Adrian fetched one and thanked him for checking. Then he returned to the guest room and closed the door with a gentle click. I told my parents he was performing politeness to make me look cruel. They said they wanted us both to breathe. When they left, the apartment felt organized in a way I did not like. I opened the guest room and smelled a faint hint of printer toner. On the desk sat a single USB stick next to his wallet, and a tiny piece of tape on its side showed today's date in a neat hand. I picked it up and set it down because my fingers felt hot. The printer spooled once and then stopped, and the tray stayed empty, like a joke it refused to tell. I asked if he kept records on me, and he said he kept records on himself. I called that dramatic and unhealthy. He said it was practical. I told Nyla that Rowan had pulled away and that Adrian was pushing me toward a corner. She said corners are chosen and that I should make room for small kindness. I said kindness was for people who got caught, and I had only joked. She said a joke can be a map. I hung up before she turned wise again. My screen lit with a message thread titled Follow Up, and the preview line showed a new still from the rooftop with my grin too wide. I deleted the notification without opening it because I wanted silence to prove I had control. Near midnight, I found Adrian in the kitchen with headphones on and a spreadsheet open on the laptop. It only showed initials and dates without labels. I asked if he was building a case like a detective. He said he was tracking schedules and expenses for clarity. I said clarity was code for punishment. He said clarity was a kindness for a child who needs stable days. I told him I would not be trapped by serious faces and tidy columns. He said we would keep things civil and that he would handle it properly. He rinsed his cup and placed it on the rack with the kind of care that made me angry. He set his phone on the counter, and an alarm preview blinked with the label paper drop 6:40 a.m. He tapped it off and slid the device into his pocket. I asked what a paper drop was, and he said it was a reminder for himself. I said I wanted to know the plan. He said plans would become clear in time, and his tone did not rise. He turned off the light over the sink, and the room swallowed our faces. The action came gentle and heavy at once, as he repeated that he would handle things properly and stepped toward the hall. The door latch clicked when he left with a small bag, and in the quiet I heard footsteps pausing outside our door like the building itself had taken a breath. The cliffhanger held when the footsteps stayed there a moment longer, then moved on, and I was left with the word properly echoing inside the cupboards. The office tower lobby was bright and cold, and people moved like a slow river. A woman stepped to me with a folder and said, "Service was complete," and I felt every camera lens turn. The papers named a divorce petition with temporary financial and possession orders, and a custody schedule filing for school pickups and overnights. A defamation takedown was listed for the auction clip, and I read the words twice. Adrian thanked the server and kept space. Security asked me to step aside while I held the stack. The stamp said orders were granted. The doors hissed. My phone showed a hearing time.